Broadcasting from the KMF Collective Studio, it's time for the Keep Moving Forward podcast. Join us every week as we dive into the stories of remarkable current and former athletes that have transitioned into the real world. Now here's your host, Katie Galley.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 250th episode of the Keep Moving Forward podcast. I'm your host, Katie Galley. In the KMF Collective Studio with me today, I have founder of Clar-e-ty Nutrition, Clare Burton. How are you doing, Claire?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for stopping by, Claire, and sharing your story with us. I'm really excited to dive in. So to get the ball rolling, can you share a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how, if at all, was your childhood shaped by athletics?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Virginia, now on the western side of the state. So generally when people think Virginia, they think Richmond, Northern Virginia. That is nowhere near where I'm from. So I'm from the mountains in a town called Roanoke. It's a really great town. When I was growing up, I think everyone deals with this. So like, I hate my hometown, and then they leave, and then they actually love it.
Yep.
That very much was the same thing for me. And my town has gone through a lot of developments. And one of the biggest things that they did to actually like develop the town even more and to be an actual just better place, in my opinion, was they embraced the outdoors. So I kind of grew up, it's in like the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Like I literally live like 2 minutes off of the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Wow.
You've got some of like the best hiking right there. We have like a giant star on top of a mountain. And so like you can hike or just drive up to the star. So I kind of grew up with that sort of love for being outdoors, just inherently of like, that was one of the only things really to do. And something that I actually love about my hometown. But I grew up pretty much doing every sport. I started, I think, with dance when I was like 3 or 4. I quit because my feet hurt, but apparently I thought it was okay to do gymnastics after that. So
Naturally.
I did gymnastics for like 8 or so years. And then I ended up moving on from gymnastics to soccer because at that point, gymnastics was starting to like take over my life. And I think I was in like 6th grade and I wasn't like that good or dedicated to it. So moved on to soccer. Most of my friends were playing soccer too, and then ended up just like diving into that. While I played soccer, occasionally I would do like swimming. I tried basketball one year, tennis one summer. I did volleyball for a couple of years, but then kind of had to make a decision. I was heading into high school if I wanted to choose full-time soccer or full-time volleyball. I was better at soccer. And my soccer team actually was going to do an international competition, so
Wow.
I chose that. So I played soccer pretty much up until I went to college.
Wow. And so, I mean, making that decision, of course, you know, it's a challenge. You deciding, okay, I want to see how far I can take this one sport. So having to choose one. But then at that time, Claire, did you have aspirations to try and continue on to the next level to college with soccer, the sport that you chose? Or was it really you just were choosing for the sake of the high school sport you were going to play?
I would say when I was like a freshman in high school, I had no idea like what I really wanted to do. So I more chose it just because I enjoyed the sport. I was better at it. So I saw just better direction, at least in high school. But by the time that I was like graduating, I really had just with what I wanted to do academically, I did have to make kind of a choice. I wasn't good enough at soccer to play at the schools that I wanted to go to. And then just, I commend any college athlete with managing times and schedules because I didn't have the ability to do it or desire to do it. So I ended up just kind of going a more academic route with college.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense because having to make those different decisions along the way, but then too, being driven so much by already knowing what you wanted to do academically. So what did you decide to pursue, or what career path did you see yourself going down at that time?
I decided, I think freshman or sophomore year in high school, to go the medical school route. So pretty much everything I did after that was setting myself up to go to medical school. I came into college going in as a chemistry major, and I actually did do that. So I graduated with a bachelor's in chemistry. So that took a lot of my time because labs and homework. And I remember like where I lived in college was like kind of in the middle of like frat party central. And I would just be like up until like 4 or 5 in the morning, like doing, especially my senior year, I had to do a lot of like lit reviews and peer reviews and stuff like that. And I just remember like hearing everyone party like outside my window. And then I'm just like sitting there with my light on. So it probably looked like I was partying, but I was really just crying because I was writing papers about like rocks and stuff.
Oh, that's so sad. So much
Yep.
studying. So why then chemistry? What was the genesis behind that decision?
I love math. So I was actually a lot better at math in high school. And I don't know if she'll ever like listen to this, but I hope she does. But I had like the best math teacher throughout high school. And so I really just liked math and chemistry. And I wasn't at the time, like a lot of like, I'm not really good at like, I wasn't, I'm a little better now. But I was not super good at just straight memorization. I was more really good at like understanding like all of the potential tools and how to create like a puzzle essentially to get to the end destination, which is like essentially math, and chemistry is a scientific form of that. So
Yeah.
I just found a little bit more passion, or just it was a little bit more effortless with chemistry because it was so math based and like directions based as opposed to straight memorization. Like I'm really terrible at just memorizing. I'm very forgetful. So memorizing is not my strong suit.
I gotcha. And so that decision to go into chemistry, really loving math, where did you see yourself going? I know you said entering into the medical field or going to medical school. Did you know specifically what you wanted to do from there? Or was it just medical in general was the kind of ultimate goal?
Initially, it started out as surgery. Again, kind of the same thing as surgeries very much. You start with a problem and you have a solution. You have to figure out how to get there, which is, how chemistry and math really is. And honestly, now what I do as a nutrition coach is the same exact thing. So I initially started with wanting to do surgery. I like working with my hands. I like doing things. When I was so after I graduated from college, I went to grad school and I was in a master's program doing research. And then I got exposed to women's health. So right before I decided not to go to medical school, I was actually leaning more towards the obstetrics and gynecology route, just to be a resource for women. So that was kind of the two pathways that I was generally leaning towards with going that med school route.
And that's cool. The idea that you would, having your mind set on one specific thing, but then be exposed to something kind of totally different, and that piquing your interest enough to even consider pursuing it.
Yeah. I decided to do surgery or go the surgery route, like again, freshman year of high school. And then it wasn't until my second year of graduate school. So I had gone through 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and then decided to start the initial process of like changing things up. So yeah, it was really interesting to be exposed to something that would like kind of change. Like I was always like, I'm dead set on this. Like nothing ever deterred me until then.
Right. And so when you were exposed to that women's health and then starting to toy with the idea of becoming an obstetrician, was that then you made that pivot and were all of a sudden going down that path, or what happened after you kind of were exposed to that?
So I got exposed to it because my thesis in my graduate program was on breastfeeding and exploring some pathways on low milk supply. So women that don't produce enough milk to breastfeed. And if you or anyone else is familiar with like biomedical research, is when you go to present any research, most of the people that are going to ask you questions, they aren't really going to ask like big item questions, because at this point with research, it is nitpicky. It's what type of cells did you use, or what were your extraction methods, or little like things like that. And so when you present research, like you actually really have to know everything, because they're going to ask you those kind of nuts and bolts questions. Not like if you're doing, a research, like I did research on cancer for a little bit, and everyone at this point, especially like people who have their PhDs, they know everything about cancer. Like they know the hallmarks of cancer biology. So they're asking what your specific research is about. Like, again, cell lines, testing methods, triplicates, everything like that. And I was always trained to present research in that way. But when I was doing my research in sort of the women's health field and breastfeeding, I maybe had like two, and I presented I went to MUSC, which is the Medical University in South Carolina, and I presented twice there at a women's health conference and then at our student research day. And then I did a couple of other presentations. I did like obviously my thesis defense, some within our department, and then I had an international conference in Canada that I went to. And maybe 3 questions were about the science. Every other question was telling me their experience. Wow. And it's really cool because in research, like no one really talks about, like we're really disconnected from that. Like it's more all about the science, not people's experience. Like even when it does come to cancer, or like I worked on muscular dystrophy for a little bit too. But with this one, it was like what really came down to it was someone's experience as a mom going through pregnancy and postpartum was purely driven by the quality of their care. So whether that was their OB, if they had a midwife or a doula, or the lactation consultant. And it seemed to be like a very consensus thing of someone who didn't produce enough milk to breastfeed. If they had an OB that was like, you're doing it wrong, then it just reinforced that. And they found that their postpartum journey was a lot harder. Wow. But on the flip side, if they had a supportive kind of team of care, they found that their postpartum journey was a lot easier because they had that support. And so that's when, like, I've always had a passion for surgery, but nothing that was like a personal connection. And so that's really when I started to that's kind of why I sort of started to make those changes. And so then it was kind of like figuring out, okay, how can I make a career doing all of this? So because I was already going that med school route, that's how OB/GYN came into my head. And then from there, like I was more toying around with potentially pursuing nursing or a lactation consultant. And ultimately was more just trying to figure out what pathway could I go towards being a part of someone or someone's team to make their quality of life, whether that is postpartum or pregnancy or just their overall health and wellness. Like, how can I be a resource to them? So it was really driven by that. And it wasn't that like, I was like, oh, I need to be an OB/GYN. It was more, how can I be a part of a team like that that's going to empower women?
Yeah. I really love that approach too. So rather than fixating on a specific title or career path, it's okay. I love the idea that I can connect with women or connect with people who they've had these real life experiences. And then of course, on the flip side, you have that passion for the science and the math and the reasoning behind things. So where can I put myself or align myself where these two things come together and I can, help advance women or help advance people through their own experiences. So then realizing that you could do that through these different, as a obstetrician or a lactation consultant or all these different avenues then became possibilities because of learning, I guess, the experiences that you wanted to have or could hope to have in a career.
Exactly. Yeah.
Love that. So then, Claire, did you ultimately then go into either of those paths? What was the next step for you?
No. So the next step was, regardless of what I was going to be doing, there was a lot of, like, if I was going to go medicine, if I was going to go nursing, like there was going to be some sort of application process. If I had gone the nursing route, I would have needed to go to more schooling, just to get some prereqs and hours and stuff like that. So I started just kind of exploring options. I was certified and qualified to do research. So I was applying for research jobs. And at the same time, I was coaching CrossFit. And it really was just like everything that I was actively pursuing from a career standpoint, I just couldn't stand. I didn't want to do it. I was going to see that I was going to have to give up a lot of what gave me passion, which was just coaching real life human beings. If I had had the chance, my lab they already had full-time staff. So the lab that I was working in graduate school, if I could have stayed there with them, I would have 100% done it, but they didn't have the funding to do so. So I was and I was a perfect lab. Like if you're in research, you generally owe your life to your boss. And if you're, going out for like a date, or you're going to go to the gym and you have an experiment to run, your boss can say, no, you have to stay and run this experiment. And so you really give your life to the research. But my lab and my boss and our lab manager, they were both moms. Their big thing was, you run your own schedule, and as long as you get the work done, we trust you. And so it was just a really good environment. And I didn't see that anything I was applying to. So that was like, honestly, the pivotal change, because everything that I was applying to, whether it would have been medicine, nursing, I was looking at being like a research coordinator, which a clinical research coordinator just kind of coordinates between the clinical side. So working with patients, collecting maybe some specimens, some data, some samples from the patient themselves, and then connecting it to the research side. So I have a passion in research, but I know I didn't want to be a full-time researcher. Mm-hmm. So that was like some jobs I was applying for. But I really just didn't have that like passion. I just really wanted to sit there and like coach human beings. So it kind of was like I was trying to apply for all these things, but ultimately I just had more of a connection to like coaching and working with people. And so that's kind of how I sort of started to like weed out certain jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so how did then you just said you discovered the passion for coaching real life human beings, being there for people. So then how did CrossFit come into the picture, and how did coaching then ultimately come from that?
Yeah. So I started CrossFit like 2014, 2015 when I was in college. So I think most people, especially people who are athletes, they go through a period of time, like a very struggle period of after they're done with sports, they kind of don't know what to do. Like they're used to that group training environment. They're used to a competitive nature. Like for me, all I did throughout college was I ran. And I liked running, but like it was just kind of exhausting, time consuming, especially, once you get to the point you're running, over 5 miles, you're looking at a long time of things. And so I just wasn't enjoying it. A woman that I know through my hometown, it was a friend of my mom's, bought the CrossFit gym there. And she was trying to get my mom to go. And I was like, Mom, you should go. Because at this point, in the old gym kind of reaffirmed it had a lot of the classic CrossFit stereotypes. Mm-hmm. And when Tamlin bought it over, we were like, we trust Tamlin. She's not going to be that person that says you have to put weight on the bar, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, Mom, we trust Tamlin, just go try it. And she was hooked. So she got me to try out like the next week or something like that. And I was hooked. So I did it throughout kind of my remaining time in college. And then continued when I moved down to Charleston and went to the gym there. And at that time, about a year into grad school and a year into living in Charleston, we didn't have a lot of coaches at the gym. And so I was able to, one of the coaches at the time was like, Claire, you should talk to the owner about getting your L1. You'd be really good. Like at that point, I was already kind of helping people in things and like giving some advice. I was already kind of toying around with my nutrition. Like I was diving into some of that on my own. Mm-hmm. So kind of opportunity fell to get certified and get my L1. And so I did, and I just started coaching. And at that point, I just was coaching all the time and was at the gym goes through obviously there's turnover and stuff with coaches, and there was really only one other female coach, and she had to travel a lot with her husband's job. So at that time, I was kind of one of the first full-time female coaches coming on. So again, same thing, was when I had classes of just women, we were just talking about things that were different for women as opposed to men training. So one time we were supposed to do a skill day, and it was just 3 women and me. So we just sat and stretched, and it was just really nice or really empowering to see them feel like they had a safe space to be when you go upside down in a handstand push-up, does something happen? And, or what about peeing when jumping and things like that? And they learned that they're not alone in that. And that's something that all of them, whether they have had a baby, haven't had a baby, all of them kind of struggle with. And it's not really talked about because most guys don't really know how to talk about, they don't know what it's like to talk about having your period when you're going into the gym and things like that. So that's kind of where I just loved doing that. And that's kind of how I got into coaching. And again, like right when I started coaching CrossFit, I was toying around with my own nutrition and was seeing some just incredible results health-wise, and also from a physique standpoint. And at that point, like I pretty much decided that I wanted to help people have the same sort of transformation that I did.
Wow.
And be there as a resource for people in a coaching atmosphere.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, really an amazing thing to realize that, I mean, of course, going into a new sport and making that transition, you're right, from being an athlete and trying to find that community, find that competitive drive again. And so discovering it in CrossFit, but then two, in your own overcomings of different things, realizing that you could now be that safe space for other women as you entered into that space. And now they're coming in, they're new, they're trying to learn. And so being able to be that resource, be that safe place for them to come to, and then being able to bring all of this together. And so Claire, then you said you started to mess around with your nutrition and you were really pleased with the results that you were getting. So why did that kind of encourage you enough to want to start to dive in more, learn more about nutrition? Why was that the path that you ultimately decided to start to go down?
So I'll kind of make it like a long-ish story short. Ultimately, so my transformation, yes, was from an aesthetic standpoint. And I grew up just always being really like fortunate that I was playing sports and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've always been like, I grew up in the era of Paris Hilton. Like I grew up in this era of size zero, Abercrombie, Hollister, where the pants are so low rise that I've always had curves. Like even when I remember being 8 years old but doing gymnastics and having thick legs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was always how I was built. And I always was like kind of self-conscious about it until I started CrossFit, because having size and having muscle and having curves. And then at the same time, you have like the J-Los and the Kim Kardashians and Beyonce's into the world, kind of normalizing some of that thick mindset and having curves and muscles okay and encouraged. Mm-hmm. So from a mental standpoint, when I started kind of diving into my nutrition, I did have some like weight loss goals and like body composition goals that really helped me actually just kind of feel like probably when I started CrossFit was the very first time in my entire life. And I started CrossFit when I was 21 years old. And so around when I was like 23 years old was the very first time someone looked at me and said, "I wish I had your body." And that was like when you've gone 20 some years without anyone saying that they liked your body, other than like a jerk from school saying that you have a big ass. And it's just like, I don't think people understand when you say someone has like a fat ass or their butt is huge or something like that, or your legs are huge. I don't think they realize that's not always taken well.
Right.
So this is like the first time someone was like, "I wish I had your body." Like there was nothing about like huge, big, curvy, anything like that. And so that was like probably the most profound thing. And so when I started diving into nutrition, yes, there was some aesthetic changes, but it was more about eating to fuel the body that I already had. And so the mental transformation was in my mind much bigger than the physical transformation, and being able to feel comfortable wearing clothes and having someone say like, "I wish I had your body," and things like that. And then on the flip side, I was going through a lot of health problems at the time. And I was eating at a caloric intake that was just very unhealthy. I lost a period, wasn't sleeping through the night, was waking up in night sweats, struggling very much like mentally and emotionally with how I was feeling and things like that. And ultimately nutrition was what sort of healed a lot of that, and learning that, because I mean, in CrossFit, they're like, "Oh yeah, I had this one person who ate more and lost weight." And I was like, I don't know what that means. So it was really helpful to like actually learn and educate, okay, like how do I eat more? And like, how do I recompose my foods so that I do have this like eating more mentality, but I'm not also going to like gain a ton of weight doing that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, like what got me into nutrition and coaching people was my whole life changed when I did it. And I became like, the first time I went back to school for like homecoming was my very best friend, like best friend. When I walked up to her, I got there a little later. she didn't recognize me. She was like, oh, hi. And then was like, oh my God. And was completely shocked. And she was like, not only from like a weight loss perspective, but also just like, I was a lot happier. And a lot of that came through food and training and finding a workout or a training program and modality that fit my body type was one of the most empowering things. And so I was like, I want to do that for people. And that's where I started to lose that sort of connection to medicine is you do save people's lives. But I felt like I could make more of an empowering difference with working one-on-one with people from like a coaching perspective.
Wow. And that is incredibly powerful because you lived it. And so the thing that you lived, you then now can translate over into helping people along the same journey that you already walked.
Yes. And I'm sure we'll talk about it and stuff, but like I just brought on 2 coaches to work for me, and something that we've really focused on, and I've made sure that they remind and they direct a lot of their content and coaching style is reminding, like, I didn't hire them because I thought that they were pretty or they look fit or anything like that. I hired them because one of them was my client for about 6 or 7 months. And the other, we had talked about nutrition for a really long time, and I knew that they've lived it. And I think it's one of the most empowering things when you work with someone and they say, I get it. I was there. Like, I lived through the times where I just get really, really stressed and I don't eat. I lived through the 2020 where I just didn't want to focus on my nutrition because I was so overwhelmed with life happening. And it really helps from a coaching perspective to have someone that just gets it and isn't going to say, like, I was actually on a call with them yesterday and I was like, you hear a lot of moms and stuff being like, I'm so tired of the 21-year-olds telling me to have an hour-long morning routine and to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, it needs to fit your lifestyle. And so I think it's very powerful to have someone being like, I get it. Like, when you struggle on the weekends, I understand. When you feel like crap in the gym, that's because I go to the gym all the time. And I also feel like crap in the gym sometimes. And it sucks. I've cried about it before. Like, I was talking to someone yesterday and she's like, I cried at the gym. And I was like, girl, I've cried at the gym so many times to the point of my friend knows when I'm going to cry because I start looking away from him and then he just walks away from me because he doesn't want to deal with it. Like, I've been there, and I think it's just very empowering to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. There's so much power in having lived it, having those experiences that you can draw on, because then you're genuinely meeting someone right where they're at, because that's exactly where you've been before.
Yes, 100%.
Love it. And so, Claire, then, having that realization of this is what I want to do and kind of diverting your path more away from the medical pursuit that you were on and going all in with nutrition and coaching, how then did this evolve into Clare-e-ty Nutrition?
Ultimately, I needed a job and I needed a way to monetize having a job, and so I could make a living.
Yeah.
And I knew a nutrition coach at the time, and coaching CrossFit, you can't make a living off of. I mean, maybe if you worked for like a big gym like Invictus or something like that, but it's really hard to make a living. Like, for the longest time, especially when I was in graduate school, I had student loans, and my coaching money was more just like, my loans will pay rent, utilities, things like that. My coaching is truly just spending money. If I run out of the spending money, I just don't have spending money. Like, it's not a lot of money. So I needed to have something to supplement it with. And I knew that I liked nutrition. So it kind of was more just filling in the gaps there and how to start a business at the time too. I was looking into like some postpartum and pregnancy stuff as well. So I was talking to a friend who's like, I don't know exactly what to do. He's like, why don't you start a coaching business? And we were like kind of thinking about it. And that's how Clare-e-ty came to mind. Is, I do a lot of like educating people and providing that clarity. And they're like, but your name, to my name, doesn't have an I in it. It's Clare. So we're like, come up with Clare-e-ty and take the I out and put the E in. And that's kind of how Clare-e-ty was born. I got certified I knew the science of everything. I'd been years and years and years learning biochemistry, metabolism, digestion, nutrition, all these things. Like, I had a scientific background, but implementing it from a coaching perspective, I was not as good at. So I got certified to coach nutrition, took about 3 months to do all of that. I worked with some like beta, like test clients who are friends, to, implement nutrition plans, starting prescriptions, weekly check-ins, kind of grow that business. And so that was in 2018. And since then, it's just been kind of growing and developing based off of that.
Wow. And so is that the certification you got, is that like a national standard nutrition certification, or is it something that, you've developed through Clar-e-ty? Well, I guess, how did you kind of get certified in that and then ultimately move into Clar-e-ty? Yeah.
I got certified through a company called Nutrition Coaching Institute. They're an accredited organization that does educate coaches on nutrition, and they've moved on to like business specialties. They have gut, mindset, hormone, women's health, men's health, all these subspecialties and stuff like that. It's run by Jason Phillips.
Okay.
And so that's where I got certified. And then from there, that gave me the basis to be able to coach and stuff. And then from there, a lot of everything that I've been learning and growing is either through experience, my own research, and just kind of staying updated on current research data, nutrition practices, and things like that.
Yeah. And so clearly, I mean, you've grown a lot. You started in 2018. It's now 2021. And you said just yesterday, you had a call with 2 of your new coaches that you brought on. So how has Clar-e-ty grown today? I mean, do you have enough clients now where you needed to bring on new coaches?
Yeah. So 2020 was an interesting year for many people.
Yeah.
And the big thing that I ran into in 2020 was, especially when everything started, actually, let me rewind. So, it's a little bit of a lot of stuff together. So I charge like a monthly rate, and I'm on a couple of like coaching boards and stuff like that, groups on Facebook and everything. And there was a thread on Facebook saying, how much do you charge? And I was just interested. So I was just reading, and I was seeing people charge $600 to $1,000 a month on nutrition. And I do not even charge remotely close to that. In my opinion, I charge a lot of money, to the point of like, I don't know how I would physically add more unless I wanted to, like, if I were to charge someone more, I would need to up the value. Making sure, like, if I had someone paying more, like the $600 a month, if they wanted to pay me that, we're doing like, they literally have access to my phone. They have calls with me all the time. I would have to really, really up that value. So when I ran into 2020, I saw an opportunity to be able to grow and provide more value, but I don't want to up money. So the thing is, like, I have an ideal clientele, and it's that 25 to 35 female range. And I'm 27 years old. I cannot, nor do I really want to see the value in paying $1,000 a month on nutrition. And that's really a high ticket item that's going to appeal to a clientele that I just don't enjoy working with as much as I do with like the types of clients that I work with. So when I ran into 2020, I didn't want to up my rates, but I more wanted to provide a little bit more value. So I ended up, just by virtue of doing that, spent way longer with my clients. I was doing way more video calls, way more Zoom calls, actual calls. I will spend probably now, I used to spend like 15 to 20 minutes, just because, especially before 2020, it was way more, okay, this is happening, this is why, let's do this. But 2020 was such an interesting year that I loved it for my clients, because a lot of them were forced to listen to me. So a lot of times people will come on being like, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight. I'm like, we're honestly not ready. Your stress is high. You aren't eating enough. You aren't eating the right things. You can barely consistently adhere to one thing. Why am I going to cut your intake, create cravings? Hunger is going to be worse, make stress even higher by cutting your intake. And I get sometimes a little bit of pushback on that with normal, or with like outside of 2020. But as I got into 2020, it forced people to actually be like, okay, you're right. So with some people, I was like, all right, we're going to try it. Let's see how it goes. And so I created a diet for them, and they were like, oh, you were right. This is terrible. I'm miserable. So it really forced them to listen to me. So by the time I didn't have many people on active diet phases over the course of 2020. And a lot of people were like, I need to let this time, now that I'm stuck at home, just be the time that I'm going to heal my relationship with food. I'm going to work on some of these daily practices. So my check-ins went from taking about 15 to 20 minutes per check-in to an hour, feeling like, I occasionally will turn a check-in into like, I'll just record myself kind of going through their check-in so they can kind of see my thought process and some of the things that kind of go through my head with things like that. And if they have a ton of questions, it's just easier for me to verbally give those answers as opposed to typing them out. And if someone's having a really hard time, like I want them to feel like they have me as a person, not just like someone that they're texting and emailing. So I'll do that. And like those verbal check-ins would be 30 minutes of just me talking. It's like almost recording a podcast.
Yeah.
So I was spending a lot of time. So by the time I probably got to like August or September, I was spending like 12 hours a day, just coaching, like answering emails. I was having to move. I usually answer check-ins for my clients on just 2 or 3 days out of the week. And I was having to spend pretty much all week answering emails, writing some workouts, especially like at-home workouts for people. And I was finding myself barely able to like hang on from like a content perspective, a growth perspective. And I was just feeling myself kind of stay stagnant. And so it was like, if I wanted to improve and grow my business, I'm either going to have to charge more or I'm going to have people work for me that can provide the same value that gives me a little bit more time to grow the business and do outreach and things like that. And so I probably 2 years ago was like, I'm going to have a team. And then I was like, oh, you're not ready for this at all. So I decided to wait until the time is right. And I'm not a very like religious person. But the same exact day, within like 3 or 4 hours of each other, Emily and Ashley they don't know each other either. They've never met. They didn't know either was in my life. They both sent me a message being like, hey, was wondering how your year was going. Both of them were kind of going through the certification process on their own. And I had given them some insight of if they wanted to like start a nutrition business, how to do so. They both like, we're not really interested in that. We'd be interested if you want to set up like a mentorship or internship, or even if you're looking at bringing on a coach to work for you. And I was like, well, I think this is not a coincidence. Like this is, someone somewhere, a universe or something telling me like, okay, now is the time. And it was a really good opportunity to be like, okay, so I can create more impact and I can have them, work on working with clients, and I'll still work with clients and stuff too, because I love doing it. Right. But now I can give some of that away. Like they write a couple of blogs and articles and stuff. They do some of their own content. And so it kind of cuts that time frame off for me. And so I can do things like do workshops and seminars on growing businesses. I can work on extra certifications, and I can educate them on stuff like what I'm learning. And so I decided to do that. And that's kind of how my business grew. It wasn't necessarily from a client base. It more was, I was kind of reaching my cap. I've worked, I think about a year ago, I worked myself up to 50 or so clients a month. And was just completely burnt out, was just running myself to the ground. So for me to be able to, and I ultimately want to change people's lives, and I can't do that, or I could. I have to work on that. I could, but I'd have to sacrifice a lot of stuff that I don't want to sacrifice. So I decided to bring them on so that we can reach more people. So say I really only want to work with 20 people. They want to work with 50 people. My max 50 number of clients that I possibly could handle now becomes upwards of 100 plus. So it really was a way for me to be able to reach more people without just running myself into the ground.
Man. And that's how you do it, right? You had to grow and scale. And that's one, having that realization about yourself of, your mission, you want to ultimately change people's lives. Well, the way to do that is you have to, if you can't physically bring on more people to do yourself, then you grow your team so that you can have your own, arms extended, and those people helping to impact others out there that you might not have been able to reach otherwise. And I love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And so Claire, obviously growing in the last year and having the, everything that happened in 2020, but having it brought you, bringing on 2 new coaches and growing and expanding your reach and client base. Looking forward now into 2021, where are you seeing Clar-e-ty going? What do you hope it grows into?
That's a very great question. I'm really bad with goal setting. I actually just wrote a blog and an article that I released right before this and about like goal setting. I'm very, very stubborn. So if like someone tells me to do something, I'm like, I have to change it just enough. So I'm not actually doing it, but I'm kind of doing it. I'm truly the worst person in the world. Like my friend who writes my workouts, I'll be like, I don't want to do that. And so he'll literally just take time out of his day to like change it to something that I want to do. Like I'll be like, my knee hurts. And then I'm like, all right, Claire, you need to buck up and deal with it. So I'll just like go ahead and do it. So he'll send me some new workout and stuff to do. And then I send it back, be like, I did it. I PR'd. And he's like, what is wrong with you? So I'm really bad when it comes to goal setting. I more focus on, and this doesn't work for everyone. People are very goal driven and want hard goals. I work a little bit better with intention. So for me with 2021, my goal really is to tie everything together. So 2018 was my year to start. 2019 was my year to learn and educate myself and test my limits. So I traveled to, like in 2019 alone, I traveled to Belgium. That was just for fun, but I traveled to Belgium. I joined a coaches like collective and traveled to Seattle. I traveled to a couple of other places. I went to Scottsdale, Arizona. Like I went to all of these, I got certified and educated in a number of things, went to a lot of seminars, networked with coaches, and really just like ran myself into the ground, seeing what is my max limit. And then 2020 was a year, I didn't intend for it to be a year of like self-growth and internalization growth. But obviously when you have like a global pandemic and a shutdown, you're forced to change. But it forced me to really to make some of these changes. And I think one of the best things that I'm very thankful of was having that sort of like realization that I need to do more. I want to, and I need to do more for my clients to show up for them. And that all of that tied together is kind of what I want to focus on for 2021. So making sure that I prioritize all of these things and come up with actually like being a boss. It's a very weird mentality to be like, when you run your own business, you're like, oh, I kind of have a job. I really feel like I just hang out with my cats and answer some emails and eat food and write on social media. But now I have like 2 people that hold me accountable to do more. And so it's very much forcing myself into that mentality of like being a boss, stepping up my game, and kind of tying all the things that I've done for the past 3 years so that it's to a more scalable and just more impact mode.
And that is, I mean, being able to, you set goals. See, you did that. That was good. It's looking back on, I mean, being able to track and see what 2018 was for you then up until today and being able to, wanting to bring all of that together. But then you're right. I mean, I guess it can be easy if you're an entrepreneur to, when you're only relying on yourself and there's not, other people in the mix, you can have friends and a community around you that will hold you accountable. But it seems as if it would be something totally different when you actually have people reporting to you and you are setting that gold standard of, okay, well, this is what I'm putting out there and I want people that I bring onto my team to do that same thing. So what kind of standard or what kind of model am I setting then?
Exactly. Yeah.
So Claire, I mean, clearly having accomplished this much and going and navigating so many different transitions in your life and looking forward, knowing, of course, the goals that you have with Clar-e-ty and wanting to continue to grow it and reach more people. I just have one final question that I ask all of my interviewees. What do you want to be remembered for?
That's a very good question. My joke answer is my cats, because
yes.
I've literally had people hire me just because I have cats, and they're really funny. And like, I literally got like 5 cat mugs this year for Christmas and did like a week of cat mugs. And people were like, you seriously have 8 mugs that are cats. And I was like, I know. So that, and I think that's one of the cool things with businesses nowadays is people, when they think business, they think Amazon, Google, like, you think business suits and blah, blah, blah. But I think part of small businesses is you hire the person. And that's one of the coolest things that I never realized was that I get to run a business where I truly get to be myself, and I can be really, really weird. I can like post weird pictures of my cat. My first cat that I got has extra toes. So I can post a picture of her cat or her like extra little toes. And it's really funny and people love that. So I do like wanting to be remembered for like, I think just being my authentic, weird self. It's something that like, I think as a woman, you grow up thinking like you have to fit in this one box, and there's so many ways that you can be you, and something that like, you know, growing up, you're like, I have to fit into this one certain idea of what a entrepreneur is or what an employee is. And I think being able to demonstrate to people that you can be goofy and funny and weird, but you can also get stuff done, and that's okay. That's something that like I think from my personal life I do really well. Like I, you know, have always hung out with like quote unquote like popular kids, but I never was like the popular kid because I was always super weird and nerdy and stuff. And I never felt like I had to. Like in high school I didn't drink or anything like that because my mom scared the crap out of me. And so, you know, that was something that like not I got made fun of, but like was definitely a thing. Is like I never got invited to parties and things like that, which I'm very grateful for. But like I didn't do any of that stuff. I was like kind of goofy and weird. Like even when I would present research, like I'm gonna make jokes. That's gonna be what I'm at. And I think it's cool to be able to start a business that lets me like just be me. And that's something that kind of I guess I hope that I'm remembered by, is like not trying to fit into a certain, you know, type of what a person's supposed to be. Like you're allowed to be X, Y, and Z.
Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest, check out the show notes at keepmovingforward.us. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter to stay up to date on all things coming out of the KMF Collective Studio. Always remember, you can beat the odds and go the distance if only you keep moving forward.